Okay, welcome to the February 1st, 2021 Board of Directors meetings for MSAD 51. Thank you for shifting and being with us remotely tonight so we can make sure everybody gets home and stays home safely due to the storm. I need to call to order through roll call since we are remotely. So when I say your name, please just say here or present. Peter Bingham.
Here.
Kevin Desmond.
Here.
Margot Harrington.
Here.
And Maximovich.
Here.
Tyler McGinley, present. Kate Perrin.
Here.
Mike Simmons. I'm not sure. Looks Mike Simmons, can you hear us? I can see you. All right, we'll come back. Jennifer Stewart.
Present.
Mike Williams. Looks Mike Simmons, can you hear us? Elias Leggett-Barr. All right, we'll come back.
Yeah.
And Madison Dalton.
Here.
And Mike Simmons. I just see you frozen. Oh. Mike, can you say here or present? Okay, I'm going to assume he can't hear us. Okay. Jeff, I don't believe we have any recognition for this evening. Am I correct?
That's right. We don't have any tonight.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to approval of the January 19th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'll go through roll call again. Peter Bingham.
Yes.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
And Maximovich.
Yes.
Tyler McGinley. Yes. Kate Perrin.
Yes.
Mike Simmons, can you hear us?
Yes, I got my audio fixed. Thank you.
Okay, and you are present and you are voting yes on the approval of minutes?
Yep.
Thank you. Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Michael Williams?
Yes.
Elias Leggett-Barr?
Yep.
And Madison, you were absent, correct?
Yeah. So that's the same.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to public comment. And I just wanted to refer back to, we have a new version of public comment policy that was edited back in or revised back in December of 2020. And there's one thing that continues to come up as a pattern that we continue to see at public comment. So I just wanted to reference one of the items from this policy, which is that the board chair, myself, is responsible for ensuring orderly conduct of board meetings and making sure that the items followed are followed within this policy. And one of those is that speakers are expected to follow the rules of common etiquette, including refraining from using vulgar and abusive language, yelling, arguing, or making defamatory comments. So if you have an issue with a personal issue with somebody on this board, we ask that you keep it to yourself and you speak about the business of the board and the district. So with that, almost lost power. Andy, do we have any public speakers this evening?
We have a few,
Okay.
starting with Sean McVarity of Cumberland.
Okay.
Chairperson McGinley, thank you for the time. It won't take very long. I'm awaiting your response to my questions about the Equity Leadership Committee meeting link. As this is a taxpayer-funded public meeting, all community members should be able to attend, see an agenda, read published minutes, etc. Will you be sending that soon?
Per usual, I'm not going to answer your questions.
Outstanding. You are such an amazing chairperson. Also, I await your response with Nick Schuler-Wiston to the questions about the school board member and Maximovich. But also remember pains and penalty of perjury. That's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Could we move on to the next speaker?
Yes, Julie McDonald of North Yarmouth.
Thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do have my comments timed to 3 minutes, but I have to rush through to get it in 3 minutes, but I will go ahead and read it for the 3-minute time period. Chairperson McGinley, board members, thank you for having me this evening. I'd like to speak on the equity committee issue. Last time I spoke on this issue, I was placed on a social media racist list. I certainly hope that does not happen again. I'd like to start by referring the group to Chris Hoffman's December 12, 2020 Greeley High School weekly newsletter. He was referring to a student forum he had recently attended, stating, quote, "Certainly it's been a tough year. Student government shared the results of their recent survey of the student body, and one particular data point has stuck with me. 2/3 of students reported that their stress levels are somewhat or significantly higher than in the previous year, and that he would be working to better understand this and how he could support the students as a result," end quote. I would just like to recommend at this time that, getting into this equity language that has been proposed is not a good time for this, with students already stressed and depressed. I don't think it's the appropriate time to tell them that they are racist and white supremacists simply because they were born in white skin, something they can absolutely do nothing about. I am also concerned about a private Facebook group that not everybody in the community has access to by a member of the board, talking about anti-racism work and what examples of white privilege are in Cumberland, North Yarmouth. I'm concerned about this because not every taxpayer in Cumberland, North Yarmouth parent can have access to this group and see what's being discussed. I also would like to raise my concern with the USM Ibram Kendi partnership that's been proposed. Ibram Kendi is a critical race theorist, self-described, who declared that the expression, quote, "legal vote" used to describe votes cast in conformity with US law is functionally racist. The same Ibram Kendi who last September attacked Amy Coney Barrett after the mother of 7 was appointed to the Supreme Court, suggesting that she was a white colonizer because she and her husband had adopted 2 Haitian children. Quote, Kendi said, "Some white colonizers adopted Black children. They civilized these savage children in the superior ways of white people while using them as props in their lifelong pictures of denial, while cutting the biological parents of these children out of the picture of humanity." I can't imagine saying to students of MSAD 51, this is someone we're going to hold up as an example and you need to read this author. I think this partnership is no better than the previous Community Change Inc. partnership. I just really wish, it's Black History Month. I absolutely wish with every part of my being that we could get back to Martin Luther King Jr., where he said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that we hold these truths to be self-evident."
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, your time has come to 3 minutes.
Okay, that was the last sentence. Was Martin Luther King.
Okay, last we have Hannah Berry of Cumberland.
Thanks.
Good evening. Is my audio working?
Yes.
Great, thanks. This is my first time doing public comment on Google Meets. So Chairperson McGinley and board, thank you for your patience as I learn the technology here. I really just have 2 comments for the board and the administration tonight. One is which I promised my 3 teenagers I would advocate for a snow day. So I have a house full of kids who classic traditional snow day, and I have 3 burnt out teenagers from sitting on a computer. So for what it's worth, I put my vote in. I'm sure there's lots of people who want to get the day in and not have to make it up in June. But for what it's worth, my kids would love a snow day. And the second item I'd like to bring up is I would really love it if the board could maybe share publicly in the coming months discussions about fall planning. I'm very concerned that we might not make a plan for the fall in time to make positive changes, because I know there's a lot on our plates to get through this school year. And there's also a lot going on with our potential new school structure. But I think with some planning ahead, we can make next year more successful, and we can make some positive changes for all the students at MSAD 51, because I think we can probably all agree the virus is not going to be gone in September. We don't know how many people will be vaccinated by then, but I'm pretty confident, and I'm not a scientist, that the virus will still be here. So I'd like to, try to make, some positive changes in the meantime so that we can have a successful next school year. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's it.
All right. Thank you, Andy. All right, so moving on, we have a presentation from our mental health team. And I don't know, Jeff, if you would like to kick this off and give a little bit of background. I know we talked a little bit about it at our last meeting, but.
Yes, this was a conversation that started at your previous board meeting around mental health and the fact that there have been some losses of parents recently in the community, several parents. And obviously mental health is something that's been on our mind always, but certainly this year with the pandemic, it's made it much harder, I think, for everyone to operate and function in a typical way. And certainly the stress of all of this is falling on our families and our staff, and certainly our students as well. We've noticed that in the school district. So I asked several members of our social work and school counselor team or mental health teams to come tonight and present to you. And Eric Brown, who's a social worker in the district, also a mental health specialist. Jonna Mulligan is a school counselor at Greeley High School, and Don Lane is a school counselor at Mabel I. Wilson School. And they're here tonight to give you some more information about mental health services in the district, and then a little bit more specifics about this year during a pandemic. And so they have some information for you, so I'll turn it over to them.
Great, thank you to the board and to as well, Jeff, for allowing us the opportunity to talk tonight about the social and emotional needs of our students and how things have been going this year. Just as a caveat, I am home with my 2 kids and my husband in the back. So if you do hear some noise, that's what's going on back there. So we had the opportunity, Jonna and Eric and I, to chat with our counterparts across the district. And I'm going to kind of present what's happening at the Wilson School, and then Eric will look at the middle levels, and Jonna will talk a little bit more specifically about the high school. And I'd like to kind of just start out with what's going well, but also want to acknowledge that this is just sort of a slice of our perspective from the social emotional team. I'm sure if you were to reach out to parents or to students, it might be a different perspective or more information to sort of round out the full picture. So what's going well right now, at least at the elementary level, in the mornings when you're there, you see a lot of little guys and gals coming in upbeat and smiling and positive about their school day. I think kids are really excited still to be coming to school, even though it looks a little bit different than it has in years past. We have seen a significant reduction in behavioral and office referrals over previous years. And also the referrals for social and emotional supports, at least coming into the school counseling team, are down. And I think this might be different than in the older grades, but what we believe is contributing to this positive shift, at least at the elementary level, is that when kids feel safer, they do better. And there's a lot of things right now, despite the pandemic, that is allowing students to feel safer in our building. There's a very consistent schedule. There's a lack of transitions, moving from room to room. The class sizes are significantly smaller. Having lunch in the classroom, a lot less people in the hallway and on the bus, allowing kids more personal space when they're at those individual desks, helps kids to feel safe. And so I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of those behaviors go way down. I think also just developmentally where our kids are at is that at this age, a lot of little ones love to be home. So the idea that they're home more is not a negative necessarily for them. Of course, that's not true for all students, but for a large proportion of our students. And teachers, because of small class sizes, have a lot of more one-on-one time with their students. So they're getting to know them in ways that they might not have had the chance to in previous years. Another thing that's going well is the classroom guidance lessons. While we used to be able to provide them on a weekly basis, we're now doing them every other week just because of the limits of my current schedule, and our Barb Neff, who's the other school counselor's schedule. However, on the weeks that we don't see students, we are providing a seesaw lesson to help reinforce what we're seeing in class or doing in class. And we've been focusing a lot on feelings identification, coping strategies, including things like mindfulness skills, learning about compassion and gratitude and diversity. And students are currently learning things like about the brain and its role in emotional regulation. And during those class lessons, students are provided opportunities to talk about their feelings with each other in class. And I can't tell you that there isn't anything sweeter than listening to kindergartners check in with each other and asking each other how they're feeling and sharing those things. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity for kids. And through Seesaw, students are having an opportunity to share with their school counselor about how they're feeling about situations that are coming up for them, offering opportunities for them to process those situations, think about what maybe they could have done differently. And it's not necessarily the same as an individual counseling session, but that can be very therapeutic for kids to be able to share, to know that someone's listening, and to have a voice coming back to them in reference to those pieces that they're sharing about. We're also working on a mid-year check-in for the older students to kind of just get an opportunity for them to share about how in-person and at-home learning is going. And based on those reports, we'll look to see which students might need additional check-ins. Our social workers are continuing to work with students individually and virtually, in person and virtually, and they're receiving their referrals primarily from parents and classroom teachers. And since behavioral referrals are down, the social workers are currently better able to meet the needs of the students that they are working with. While we're not offering as many group opportunities because of COVID and the constraints around that, these group meetings are still occurring where applicable. Some of the social workers are attempting to do some small group stuff virtually for students who are feeling lonely, doing a social group via Google Meets. They're also talking to parents and providing psychoeducation around normal responses that children are having to the pandemic and offering strategies and ways to connect with their kids, sharing community resources. And the behavior strategists and school social workers are also supporting students with remote learning, which continues to be, I think, one of the largest areas of struggle for our students. We also have a robust RTI process that's working to help support students' academic, behaviorally, and social emotional needs. And school-wide, we have the behavior team initiatives and celebrations that I think just help contribute to a positive school atmosphere for students. Things like snowman decorations and gratitude trees and Wilson Wows and Wilson the Turtle videos and pajama days. We have staff greeting students as they come in the morning and walking them to the bus at the end of the day, which is a wonderful way to connect. And I know a lot of the kids look forward to those little conversations they're having on the way to the bus or their parents' car. So that kind of takes us to what are our challenges at this point. I think the students' number one complaint so far is their frustration with at-home learning. Students at this age require a little bit more direct support with schoolwork, which is challenging to provide remotely, both for the teachers and for the adults with whom they're living, their caregivers. Social workers are also seeing some separation anxiety beginning to crop up, which makes a lot of sense given that students are spending the 5 days at home before coming back into school. So it's natural for them to then have a little bit of not all students, but having a tricky transition back into the building. Social isolation and loneliness are a concern for some students, and especially for students who maybe are in a class situation where they didn't have any friends going in just because of the way the cohorts are broken out. This year, it's definitely a little bit more challenging for kids to make those connections, which makes it then harder to want to come to school if you don't feel like you have that connection in the classroom. And the more of the referrals that we seem to be getting at this point are from students who've never struggled and haven't had any problems socially, but are now struggling with motivation on those remote days and then not wanting to come to school on their school days. And then for many, it's just because it's easier and more comfortable to be at home without a mask, and the work is done quickly and they have time to play. And the motivation to get that work done when you're doing it independently can be a little bit tricky. So moving forward, kind of some of the things that we were thinking about, that one way that we can better support our students is to support the adults with which they live and work. Because if the adults in their lives are feeling stressed or overwhelmed and taxed, then they really don't have the emotional resources left to help support their children. So how can we better connect the adults in our school community with opportunities for emotional and social support, both within our building and within the larger community families? Also, it feels like a lot of pressure for students to get a lot of that work done on their remote days. And how can we better help support families? We have some students, even in kindergarten, who are finishing their seesaw assignments at 7, 8 o'clock at night, which is really late. And it's because that they don't have an adult with them during the day that's able to help support them with that. So what can we do in order to kind of lessen that pressure to get those things done, especially at that time of night? While also thinking about ways to limit screen time. I think about kids feeling that lack of motivation, that sitting in front of a computer, as we all know as adults, can be really taxing. And so how do we balance out making sure that kids have equitable access to their education while also maintaining a healthy amount of screen time for kids? We're also planning to meet as a social emotional team more regularly. We haven't had an opportunity to do that as much this year, so we're returning to those meetings so that we can make sure that we're not missing any students. And I think this was sort of brought up a minute ago, but the idea that moving forward, thinking about what next year is going to look at, like, we are really concerned about the transition back into a full week of school for kids, especially when you think about kindergartners and first graders. And for kindergartners, their only experience so far has been these 2 days a week. So how will they be able to maintain the stamina for a full school week? And what will that school classroom look like? The bigger classroom, larger amounts of people in the hallway. How will that feel for students? And how can we best support them in transitioning back into the school on a full-time basis? I believe that is all I have for now. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Eric, who will speak to the middle school.
Thank you, Don. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, board members, for this opportunity to talk about mental health in the district. Always happy to talk about it. And I know my colleagues, I speak for my colleagues, they're very happy to talk about it as well. So again, I'm Eric Brown. My title here in the district is Risk Assessment Mental Health Specialist. So I float around to all the schools in the district. And my office is over in the middle school. So I'm gonna cover grades 4 through 8. So I have some very important notes, so bear with me. There's a lot here, but I definitely think it's important to get through all of them. So I'm going to report out on grades 4 and 5 first. So the social worker there is Katie Campbell. Just a note that Katie is in the district Monday through Thursday, so off on Fridays. And the school counselor is Allie Waterhouse. So we went through a similar process with Don. We set up a format, asked them questions, they answered them. We put this information together. So some of the trends that they're seeing here in the district. As far as the positives, what's going well, they noted that in the fall that students and staff actually very much seemed to be excited to be back into school, into the swing of things, and a sense of normalcy. And they really adjusted well to the hybrid model. These young fellas, these 4th and 5th graders, really did a good job as far as the hybrid rules, wearing masks. They've been terrific at that. All the sanitizing stations, so the sanitizing hands. They're doing a really good job with the social distancing piece, which can be difficult, but they've been doing a fantastic job. Much like Don was reporting, there's been a big reduction in some of the behavior. So I think that goes with probably a reduction in sensory input. I think that goes with lower class numbers. So there's been a reduction in some of the problematic classroom behavior. Some of the biggest stressors and complaints that Ms. Campbell and Ms. Waterhouse reported were there has been an increase in absences. Students there have been disengaging more with remote learning, and that change in transition can be pretty stressful for these students. So we're talking about somebody that's in cohort A is here on Monday, Tuesday. They transition home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, have the weekend. So that's 5 days at home, and then back for 2 days. So that transition fatigue has been happening. That's been a difficult thing for students. They're stressed about meeting classroom expectations, and obviously the isolation, students are feeling lonely. With remote learning, as with any 4th or 5th grade, there's a lot of silliness that might happen when you put the video on them, so some distracting behaviors. And how some of this social, emotional, mental health is being addressed here in the district, utilizing a whole school social, emotional support approach. So there are weekly meetings with Katie and Allie, as well as the administrator, Carol MacArthur. I want to just say I've been super impressed with administrators throughout all the schools and how much they've been able to collaborate with us. So there's weekly meetings between Katie, Allie, and Carol to discuss attendance, social, emotional, and behavioral, as well as any other rising student concerns. Developmentally appropriate weekly guidance lessons for 4th and 5th with a strong focus on social emotional learning. I have a 1st grader and a 4th grader in the district. John, my 1st grader, very much appreciates those guidance lessons. He loves them, and my 4th grader looks forward to those as well. So individual meetings with students in person and online. Small lunch groups with 2 to 3 students is still happening. The students that need that support. So email, phone, and online video meetings, communications with families who need support, ongoing student support teams, RTI, 504 IEP meetings to address academic and behavioral, social, emotional needs. The bucket slips, the monthly bucket slip drawings for that positive behavior support. Monthly theme days are happening, virtual assemblies, building that positive school culture. Morning greet. This is actually a kind of a cool thing that I like to see. It's as far as positive and protective factors for young people. So there's morning greeters every day to greet the students when they come into school, and also the staff out there in the hallways to say goodbye for them at the end of the day. Support and coaching for teachers and staff around a variety of student or staff concerns. Offering coordinated staff breaks during the day. Professional development for staff, some around trauma-informed classroom practices and approaches geared to positively impact all students. Regular sharing of articles, webinars, podcasts with addressing staff wellness. Then as far as to report out on Greeley Middle School 6 through 8, the licensed social worker there, licensed clinical social worker there is Rachel Loring, and the school counselors are Bobby Goodwin and Kate Olson-Petrowski. And the trends they're seeing as far as the positives go back. So they too report that students were excited to get back at the beginning. They seem to adjust well to the mask wearing, hand sanitizing, and overall new layout of the school. The remote learning has been helpful for a group of students who have been benefited from smaller class sizes, less people in the building, lower sensory input, more teacher attention, feedback. The hybrid model has been helpful for students to connect with school and teachers. It also been helpful for those students that have a difficult time making it 5 days a week to school. There's been a reduction, so same sort of thing, a lot of reduction of behaviors, less students, classroom. The students in the middle school 6 through 8, they go from one class to the next class, so there's not any milling about in the hallways. As much as that could be positive, social interaction, it can also bring up some behavioral issues, so there's less of that. Biggest stressors and complaints from the middle school, 6 through 8, has been some students are finding it hard to motivate themselves to work from home. There's a lot of independent work without the social fun of being with your friends. And navigating technology for some is difficult. It's difficult for me. Feeling isolated. Students missing extracurricular activities, including sports. Feeling detachment from school. They worry about becoming sick. They're getting family members sick. Some are dealing with or worrying about their sick family members. And worries about being perceived as having COVID by peers. This is kind of an interesting thing that's come up. Some students are hesitant to go down to the nurse's office because they feel like other students might see them there and they may think they may have COVID. So that's been a concern by some of the students. And again, there's some transition fatigue between in-person and remote learning. Mask fatigue is happening. The social distancing fatigue. When you get older, 6 through 8, in the high school as well, social interactions means a little something different. And so they're experiencing that a little bit more. Students are missing friends that are in other cohorts, missing rituals, teenage rituals like visiting family and friends during certain times of the year, going places on weekends, birthday parties, sleepovers, all the teenage typical stuff. And some of the behaviors and challenges that are present. So again, more procrastination, less work production, needing more parental support to get to meets and do work. Again, parents are working as well. And so there's a lot of family stress that's happening there. Some kids have more difficulty being independent. Some are very hesitant to do meets in their home. I've experienced that myself, as far as some students are hesitant to do any sort of online virtual meeting because they don't have a lot of privacy at home. A large number of students are struggling with symptoms of anxiety, depression, overall sense of isolation, sadness, frustration, fatigue, anger, irritability, and hopelessness about when things will turn back to normal. Also, students with challenges with executive functioning, having significant difficulty with creating and following a routine schedule for the day without an adult support. Students that have more perfectionistic tendencies are having a hard time and not really sure when they should stop their work. So they're spending increasing amount of time trying to finish their work, and overall losing valuable social skill building time. Things we're doing to address the challenges 6 through 8. Academically, we're offering individual appointments with ed techs in person and virtually. After school homework is available as well. Socially, emotionally, individual appointments in person and virtually with school counselors, social workers. Weekly check-ins, additional appointments based on need or for potential crisis situations. Continuation of social emotional learning groups, grades 6 through 8. Support to the families as they work to support the students at home. Providing helpful information regarding mental health issues, as well as available community resources on the macro level to school staff, families, and community. Emotional support to staff members, as well as referrals to outside mental health providers, and consulting with parents, consulting in teams of staff, administrator weekly meetings, 6 through 8, Ken Marks and Mari Treblecock, to brainstorm how to better support students that are struggling and trying to keep clubs going like Civil Rights Team as well. So that's things in a nutshell as far as 4 through 5, 6 through maybe more of a nutshell. That was a lot of information, so I thank you. But just a couple more things I just wanted to throw out real quickly as far as, I know, John, I see that look there. And I don't want to step on your toes at all, John, but just a few more things that I'm seeing that's happening in the district. So trying to be more flexible, trying to be more creative is, again, providing resources, emotional support to staff members, offering community resource information. So we've had myself and Peter Scott have asked for the entire district to have the suicide awareness training. No, regardless, you're supposed to have it every 5 years, but we've asked every staff in the school to have that and be updated this year. We've met with the director of National Alliance of Mental Illness, suicide prevention director, Greg Marley. We've talked about how to make that bridges the gap between school and community. We've got training coming up actually next week with the PTO, anxiety, depression. I'm actually going to help co-facilitate that. We're in collaboration with talking about having more trainings happen there. And we're actually coordinating with some community mental health clinicians as well, talking about collaboration for school community supports. And well, I guess that's it for right now. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Jonna.
Thank you, Eric.
You got it.
So I'm Jonna Mulligan. I work in the high school. I'm one of the school counselors. I also have 2 kids in the high school. I have a freshman and a junior. And I collected information from Tiffany McFeatris, who is our LCPC, and our LADC, which is an alcohol and drug counselor, Peter Scott, who is an LCSW, and the 3 school counselors, Mandy, Melissa, and myself. And we just, we didn't go out and gather data from kids or parents or anything, teachers. So this is, like Dawn said, a slice of information. To set the stage in the high school, it becomes a little different. As soon as kids come into the high school, you have a transcript. When you have a transcript, you have credits. When you have that, the stress and anxiety from parents and kids seems to skyrocket even before COVID. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and to recognize that with the idea of this and post-secondary goals, are kids going to get scholarships? Are there sports scholarships out there? All of this plays a huge role, I believe, in the emotional well-being of the kids right now, because it's something they're very, very stressed about, and are their parents. Their teachers are also stressed, trying to make sure that the curriculum is pared down in an appropriate way to still allow them to move forward into the next level of classes in a way that is helpful to them and not hurtful. So that's a lot of stuff going on to kind of set the stage for the other things, and I'll try and keep them somewhat brief. So our school counselors do a lot of triaging for our social workers. So we often do the initial kind of meetings with kids and determine whether the student might need more extensive support, and may go to the social workers over at someone who we can meet with and give that kind of individual support. We also spend a significant amount of our time on academic support and post-secondary. Our social workers probably spend between 60 to 80% of their time on mandated meetings based on IEPs. So to just put that in perspective, we have a lot of kids who are popping up this year as needing support that haven't previously. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we maintain all of those other supports while still giving it to the students who are kind of a surprise to us. They haven't popped up previously. Things that are going well for us, for me, it was amazing to come back to school and see the kids. Just being in the building with some of them was great. And I think a lot of the kids felt that way too, most of the time. Students are also compliant, reduction in behavior referrals and all of that. We have a very active and engaged student support team that includes our admin and our social services to really support the kids. We do small group and individual meetings, much more probably individual for the school counselors than small group. Social workers still do some small groups, not as many as they did kind of pre-COVID. Also connecting kids to school-based resources. And I will say our teachers and our admin or administration with Dawn and Chris are very, very engaged in supporting the kids, which has been great. Stresses, quarantines. Quarantine was hard for kids, especially previous to concurrent learning. My own daughter's been quarantined 4 times since December. So I can tell you that it can be very challenging. Our kids are doing well with it, and our teachers are trying to do well, but there's still a struggle, like to manage that remote learning, especially before we had all the equipment. There's an increase in student absences, in student need due to, as Eric mentioned, loneliness, isolation, depression, anxiety. And again, I will reiterate, it's not necessarily the students who we had already kind of known that this was a mental health concern for them. It's some kids that we had no idea that this was going to pop up. It's hard to do meaningful social work with students virtually, because it's hard to make that connection virtually to really get deeper into the support. For freshmen, we don't know them that well. So the first time we've met them, some of them I've never seen their faces, right? They've had a mask on. Students not coming to school, I feel, is a really big issue right now. And it's really hard to access them if they're not coming to school. So it's really hard on the teachers who are being tasked to try and keep these kids current. It's hard for us to reach out to them because they're overwhelmed with email. The email for these poor high school kids is Google Classroom, emails from their teachers, from me, from the school in general. And it's easy for me to say, just go through and file it. But it's hard for a high schooler to do that. So that can be super challenging. There's also an increased stress in teachers just trying to basically triage with their students. So if you think that the amount of time they have to try and help, they're always trying to choose who needs them in a certain moment. And it's really overwhelming and stressful for a teacher to know, I could help this kid, but now I can't help this kid right now. So they're constantly kind of re-triaging this list of kids to help. And there's just simply not enough time for them to give the amount of support that they would like to give to help all the students. And for many of them, if they see them on a Tuesday, they don't see them again till the next Tuesday. So if the student wants help, they may be able to do it virtually, but they may have to wait a long time before they see them in person again. And so I think that's hard for the teachers as well, because they go into teaching and there's a little bit of a sense sometimes of failure on their part. Not that they are failing, but that they can't do what they were meant to be doing. So that's kind of hard. And if a teacher is stressed, it is hard in the classroom as well. Homework and remote work is a real challenge. Some kids can do it really well, and some kids need more support. And a lot of our kids obviously can be home alone. They're old enough to be home alone. So there's not necessarily an adult at home kind of checking in on them always. How we're trying to address some of these things. We have weekly meetings with our CHI group, which is basically our attendance group that really looks at why kids are out and then tries to send them to the appropriate resource to see whether it be at administration or social work guidance, refer to one of our RTI supports. We have 2 deans that each work with 2 of the classes, and they really kind of look down into the attendance and see kids who've been not attending for longer periods. Weekly meetings with our student support team, and this is where we determine whether a student might need math lab or English lab or learning center. We have the learning centers for executive function. We also have a library executive function that's a shorter term support. We have remote supports where teachers will have open study halls, or the executive function coach will meet with students virtually to try and help them get organized. So we have all of these things, behavioral RTI, social work, but it can be very hard to get a student to access it when they're home, because we can't just go to their study hall and pull them out. We have weekly student service meetings. We now have after-school programming on Monday and Thursday, and you can think of it as sort of an after-school study hall time that teachers can have kids go to. And these are all more opportunities for students to connect with an adult and hopefully to ease some of their stress. But on the other hand, some of our kids just avoid because they're so stressed out by the amount of people trying to help them that they sometimes can tend to avoid it. Change to our advisory model this year. So we have kids are meeting 2 days a week because they're only here 2 days a week. And it's 20 minutes now, and it's much more about connection and specific advisory activities. And I think the hope is that this will transfer into, advisory next year, and it will keep kind of blossoming to a more and more connective and activity-based program. We also, one thing we're working on, I know, with our student support team is to create a webpage that will link community resources, bibliotherapy, books for kids and parents, talk about the Yellow Tulip Project. We're looking at a virtual calming center, and I have spent the last 3 days looking at the puppy room because it's absolutely adorable. Things like that kids can access in through one page instead of maybe trying to search through different sites to gain information. We also had been approved for a wellness room at the high school through Foundation 51, but it kind of got put on hold due to COVID. And that would be a place, because kids don't have anywhere to go when they're stressed out in the high school. They can come to me, but I might have a student with me. So a place that they could go to kind of press a reset class. So that's kind of our future things. We did send communication home through snail mail before Christmas break that actually was a way for us to reach out to parents and kids and say, we need your help in supporting the kids and parents in our community, asking the students to be aware of your friends. If your friends are no longer snapping you 500,000 times a day, then there might be something going on, and to let us know. Or if a parent is noticing differences at the dinner table, that helping us is really important because we don't see them 5 days a week anymore. So it's really hard. And the other thing, I think I touched on it, but teachers are normally our first line of defense. They're usually the people in the classroom that see the students consistently for 82 minutes. They see the changes in expression, the change in behavior, and they let us know, this is what I saw in an essay. This is what I'm noticing about so-and-so. And I feel as if we've lost a little bit of that, of them being able to triage that, because they're just not able to make the same level of connection. Not that they don't want to, but it's just not something they're as able to make right now. So this means that we're really dependent on parents, peers, to kind of give us that feedback, to send us a quick email and say, you know, I'm feeling like my child might need a check-in or something like that. I do think we're missing students, not because we're not trying, but because sometimes we're finding these kids when we can't do preventative work, but when we're noticing it when grades come out, or when the student has already been struggling for longer than we would like. So that's mine.
Thank you, everyone.
Question?
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll pass it off to the board to ask any questions or for feedback, or and anyone can kind of just go ahead and speak.
I have a question, and whoever answers this, I will leave it up to the team. But I think my question is, I heard a theme of students who had not previously been identified as struggling are now coming up as needing assistance, needing support. And then that other theme of the IEP time was really pretty remarkable to hear, that 60 to 80% of the LCSW time is spent in IEP meetings. So my question as a board member—
It's not in IEP meetings, it's working with students
with
IEPs. So there's mandated support. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. So my question is, what do you and your team need more of from the board in terms of support? You know, I spoke with Julie Olson, who was great on Friday. She's like, well, I feel like we've got the right staffing. And I felt she was really helpful to talk to. But as a board, I'm always looking at what I can do to support your work more. So.
Yeah, I guess I could speak to that. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, so as far as my interviews with Katie Campbell, licensed social worker, as well as Rachel Loring, licensed social worker, clinical social worker, yeah, they spend about 27 to 28 hours per week, or 27 to 28 students right off as far as IEP goes, 504 RTI, tier 3 intervention. So, and then they have additional openings for those students that have been identified by a teacher, by a parent, by a caregiver, that are also struggling social emotionally. So we have that opportunity to address those students as well. So as John has said, yeah, there probably are students, unfortunately, that are out there struggling that we don't know about yet. I think we've been creative. One of the coolest things that I've seen is the collaboration with everybody. So it's this, not to sound cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, because it's so true. Is that everybody's just working together. So school counselors and social workers are really have kind of joined, unified, and just trying to support every student that we possibly can. As far as what extra we need, that's hard to say. I think what we're doing right now is effective. I think it's working. I think we're meeting the needs of the students that are identified. I think with talking just personally with Miss Loring and Miss Campbell, was that it's the continuing education stuff. It's that would be helpful. Some things that pop up, the ever-changing landscape of COVID. More anxiety, more depression. The telehealth, the doing this on virtual. And they both, I think we'd all agree, school counselors, social workers would much rather meet with a student in person. Unfortunately, that can't always happen, right? So we have to do this virtual thing. So just a little bit more continuing education about the ethics of that. I mean, we've all gone about trying to figure out all telehealth and doing it through Zoom and doing it through Google Chat. And we've all figured out the ins and outs, but it's just, again, it's always changing, something new presents itself. So just that continuing education piece. So I think that's something that we could probably use more of when we could fit that in. I don't know. But, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
thank you.
that's helpful. Thank you. I'm always just trying to support the work, and I feel so strongly that people are struggling right now. We can see it across the board. So however we can support you, let us know.
You got it. We appreciate
I
it.
would also add something that I think that a community approach is really important, and I'll speak for the high school, that it's really essential that our parents are somewhat on board with us, because and I know, I am a parent of high schoolers. I know that it is very hard to work and go home and basically work again. So I get that. But we're really struggling with getting kids to school and trying to make a plan with parents that kind of make happen. And I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes we have to let some of the things go. Sometimes the classes that kids are in are not the most important thing that are on the table in a given moment. And so it's a really hard thing to navigate. But I do think that kind of a stronger connection between all of us, knowing that we're kind of all in it to try and help the kids get through this, and then go next year, be successful again, and be ready to re-engage maybe in a different way. This year is not going to look the same as it does next year for these kids, and it's okay. And I think, trying to help parents understand that it is okay, that there are things, there are classes your children may not take this year, that this is okay. So I would love more time to communicate with parents, actually, because I think that for some parents, it's their first child in high school. And so everything feels very, very
Mike and then Kevin.
Thank you so much. John, I just wanted to thank you especially for that last comment. I think that's just so critically important. I think you, Jonna, Eric, Dawn, it's a Herculean effort what you're undertaking. This is extraordinary what we're going through. And, you only have control over what you have control over in the building, but this is a mental health crisis that's way beyond that. And it's something where, it's interesting seeing the impact. I'm a parent of a second grader and a fifth grader, and, and two working parents, and trying to juggle all that, and have a lot of friends who are doing the same thing. It is in a lot of cases a mental health disaster across the board. People are struggling even in what seeming like people who still have jobs and their health, but mentally are falling apart. And so the last point you made, especially about it being a community-wide effort and finding every chance we can get to reach out and, at least make connections. And so this isn't much of a question, just noting that I so appreciated you saying that, because I don't know what the broader community statewide answer to that is, but it is there. And so, but again, I just wanted to say thank you to you, to Eric, to Dawn for this, and the work you're putting in. I really appreciate it. And for my kids too, I can see it in them.
Thank you, Michael.
Kevin, go ahead, then Elias. Kevin, no. All right, Elias.
Yeah, I guess this kind of goes along with the lines of Mike's comment, that I think just a sense of gratitude and appreciation for just talking about the issue of mental health in a time such as this is just so important to have that. I think even the fact that the topic is on the table just makes students, and I think everyone, just feel supported in itself, because it kind of validates whatever everybody has their struggle in this point in time, and any struggles that would exist in a regular year, I think, are for the most part accentuated because of just how unprecedented everything is. And from a student perspective, like, I never thought especially as a senior, would want to go to school so much 5 times a week. Like, I was always kind of the thing that I was like, oh, I wonder what life would be like if I could go to school, like if the weekends and school days could flip. And that was always kind of like a fantasy, but now it's kind of like, oh, be careful what you wish for. So I think it is just from a high school perspective, I think the toll of yellow it's so much better than last spring, but it's almost painful in the sense that it's like you can taste what normal would be like, but it just like isn't there and it can't be there. And I think that's been really hard for the senior class, given this is the last really we'll know. And I think just every separate class has their own sort of thing that I can point out that's really tough. Like the junior class, it's they say, I know for all IB classes, like they don't know their teachers as well because a lot of them have new teachers this year, and at least we got the like experience of having our teachers normally for the first half of last year, and then the freshmen don't even know what like in regular high school experience is like, and the sophomores have barely even been in high school. So it's just everybody has their unique struggle that not one is worse than the other. And I think just talking about the issue in itself is a great starting point, and all of the counseling workers at the high school and throughout the district are just so great in supporting kids of all ages, because it is, as everyone's alluded to, definitely a point in time where I think everyone's emotional resilience is down. And just acknowledging that, I think, is the first step in everyone joining together and overcoming this tough time, and like fingers crossed, knock on wood, that normal comes as soon as possible.
Thank you, Elias. Jennifer and then Peter.
Thank you, Tyler. I'll just make it quick because I'll just echo what others before me have said. But Dawn and Eric and Jana, thank you for speaking on this. This was something that I brought up 2 school board meetings ago when we had a workshop, and I really think our community needs to keep it in mind every day that people are struggling, and that one day may be good and the next day isn't. And the people that we think that appear that they have it together, they don't. And we got to like watch out for the adults and those little ones, and just make sure that we all get through this, because we really need to be on top of it. And, you know, we're not seeing people on the sidelines and in the hallways and at the library and things like that. So we have to figure out how to make a connection with each other and help our kids learn how to make those connections. And I know that people are struggling, you know, using social media. There have been some bad things going around, and, you know, we got to be on top of that, because that's not where it should fall either. So thank you for being on top of this and, you know, just keeping it in the forefront of the conversation.
Peter Bingham?
I think it's Kevin. Kevin was ahead, so I will. Oh, he isn't? Okay. I want to follow up a little bit from Kate. We've got a new round of state COVID aid coming in. And, you know, it's easy to identify hardware. It's easy to identify the finite things, long-term subs. But are there some outside resources that we can bring to bear to assist you folks, you know, outreaching, let's say the parents or some of this? I have absolutely no idea of what I'm talking about, but, you know, it seems like there's a ton of resources out there that if it's relatively simple to bring them in, that we're going to have some money to do it. But again, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but just a thought.
Thank you, Peter. I'm not seeing anyone else that's raised a hand. I took a ton of notes, and I want to say thank you to everybody. I want to say thank you to Jennifer for bringing this up at our workshop a few meetings ago. This is clearly a priority and needs to kind of always be a priority of our students and our staff. There are a couple things that I wanted to make a mention of is I appreciated your honesty of things that work and things that don't work. We have to be able to focus on both of those and be open to knowing that sometimes things don't work. And sometimes those things are out of our control, which is a lot of what we're experiencing right now. I think one thing that's really important that we don't forget is that there's things that have changed that are making our students feeling safer at school. And we should pay attention to those things, even if we can't carry them on in the same way next year. But all the things like lower sensory input, small class sizes, of course we all want small class sizes, but we're seeing a positive response to some of the changes that have been put into place this year. We should keep track of those and see how we can keep those implemented or parts of them implemented as we look at what school looks like next year and the years beyond. And I hope that these conversations can help destigmatize kids asking for help. I mean, I hate thinking that kids don't want to go to certain places in the school because people may think certain things. I remember that feeling being in high school. That's doesn't go away, but I hope that the more that we can talk about this, those places are cool. I mean, I think they're cool. So, and then lastly, I just wanted to mention that I appreciate the website that you are putting together, and I hope that we can pass that along to both communities and our town councils for them to share widely, because we're only going to be successful, as everybody mentioned, if we can do this as a community. So thank you so much for all of your time and connecting behind the scenes and bringing all this to us this evening. I really appreciate all your work.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Very much.
Okay, so we will now move on to superintendent's report. Jeff, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, I'll start my report by just thanking Dawn, Eric, and Jonna for an amazing report. We have a tremendous mental health team. They do great work and are truly, I think it's, everybody should be, every parent should know that we have a good safety net in place for mental health. Like Eric said, there are students that probably, we're missing right now. That's why we need, with kids being in just 2 days, we need parents and their other students to be saying something if they feel like someone needs help. We have an excellent mental health team, and they're ready and willing to work hard to make sure that our kids are feeling connected and supported. And that's in any year, but especially in this year that we're in right now. So I want to thank all three of them for a great report and speaking on behalf of the mental health team for the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to just say that Greg Marley, who is really the state NAMI contact and director for NAMI for Maine, he's at least told me that he's put it on his calendar to be with the board on March 1st. And he is probably the most recognized expert on suicide prevention in the state of Maine. So he'll be here to talk with the board on March 1st as well. So we'll be continuing. Mental health doesn't go away, and we certainly know that it's part of the strategic plan as well. So we're happy that Greg will be joining us. And we'll also mention that we've had a phone call with Greg, a video call with Greg and a team of people, about 15 people from the district last week to get some more support from him on mental health. So with that, if our three mental health specialists want to sign off, feel free to do that. I know they have a busy day ahead tomorrow as well. And so just wanted to say that before I start my report. So the superintendent's report tonight.
Oh, we lost Jeff for a minute. I'm guessing he'll be right back. We'll give him a second to join. There he is.
Hopefully you enjoyed the report. That was it. I'm done. We'll try that again.
Okay. Not sure where Jeff keeps disappearing to. Oh, he's back. We'll try this again, and if not, we'll move on to committee.
Yeah, I would just go on to committee reports at this point.
Okay. You sure, Jeff? Okay. All right. So for committee reports, we'll start with finance. That's Kevin.
I don't have much to update other than to say that there's a meeting to continue the work through the superintendent's budget. Jeff has sent a number of items out to the board, and actually, Jeff, I'll hand that over to you if there's anything that you want to clarify from either one of your emails, the ESSER funds or the state funds subsidy.
Yeah, from the update, we did get our preliminary state subsidy numbers. It looks like we're going to be up 675,000 over our current state aid for the year. Still has to be enacted by the legislature, but that's good news. Anytime we get more state funding for a fiscal year, that's a good thing. And then we did get our Sr2 money allocations, as I wrote to the board as well, and that those are monies that are based on Title I funds. We don't get a lot of Title I funding in our district, and so that formula was used to calculate an amount which was $175,000 for the next 2 years. So, you know, in comparison, we received about $3 million between the both coronavirus federal relief monies in the fall. So this is quite different from the CRF money that we received in the fall. But it's still extra money for the district, and certainly will be used for any lingering COVID-19 direct costs that we'll surely have next year.
Thank you, Kevin and Jeff. Moving on to policy, Anne.
I do not have an update. We haven't met since our last meeting, but we'll be meeting directly before our next meeting.
Thank you, Anne. Facilities, Peter.
We'll cover everything in the workshop.
Okay. Mike Simmons, curriculum.
Yeah, we had a meeting last Thursday, and first we discussed the needs of the high school science department, and then had a spirited discussion around an early version of next year's calendar.
Great, thank you. And then student reports, Madison or Elias?
I'll start, I guess. There hasn't been too much change from the last things I said in the last board meeting about mental health. I think that we've definitely covered those bases today, though, so I'm really happy to hear that. The only special thing that I've heard about that I kind of wanted to mention is there was a music advocacy kind of group built by students. We heard a lot about it a couple meetings ago from Ms. Pollock, Ms. Carlson, I believe. And some students have moved forward to talk to our town senators and stuff like that, and it's really exciting to hear about. And I just know that it's predominantly juniors. There are a couple seniors and a couple sophomores, I believe, but yeah, it was something exciting to hear.
Yeah, for sure. That's very exciting. And I guess from a curriculum standpoint, we just wrapped up the first semester, which for seniors means kind of, it's like the climax, like, oh, okay, these are getting sent to colleges. Got to keep your act up, and then not that the grades can just fall off the track, but it's like it's a bit of the pressure taken off. And I guess looking tomorrow, we are obviously probably, I don't know if Jeff is going to call it yet, but probably looking forward to a snow day. So I think just the overall snow day vibes have been changed with the online format. But I think aside from everybody sticking in there, and I think it's been definitely an eventful year so far, that it's crazy to think about 1 year into 2021 already being gone. But I think just the overall student, and not the, as we've discussed in this meeting, there are definitely difficulties as a result of factors that we are all familiar with. But I think everyone's grateful for things that the board are doing and just keeping the students' thoughts and perspectives in mind, whether it be panels or just trying to make this year as normal as possible.
How about a red day, Elias?
I wouldn't say the red days are exactly the vibe, but it's all good.
Seniors never like any days that we have to make up at the end of the year or anything.
Oh yeah.
Or red days or anything like that.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, I think some sledding will still be on the docket, but that.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I'm sure. Going to get enough snow.
Thank you, Elias. All right, so moving on to communications, I don't believe we have anything this evening unless something else has come up. All right. We don't have any items for action, but we are going to move into a workshop for the primary school project design, and we will have Oak Point Associates joining us this evening. And I believe I've seen a few joining us. Peter, I'm going to pass this off to you as this is your committee, at least, and then maybe Jeff and Tyler from Oak Point can take it from there.
And please let me know who I'm supposed to allow in besides Rob and Tyler.
Yep, we are going to be expecting Sarah Smith, Allison Town DiMatteo, and Jack Gagnon.
Thank you. I'll let them all in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
So just before we get into the presentation with Oak Point, just to just briefly cover how we've got to this evening. Over the last couple of months, we have again approved the possible purchase of the land adjacent to the Performing Arts Center. So as a result of that, the Finance Committee, the Facilities Committee was directed to work with Oak Point and the administration to come up with a rough site plan of where this pre-K through 1 school might be located. We had a preliminary meeting last week where Oak Point made a presentation with the Finance Committee. A lot of questions were brought up, and Oak Point did some more work this morning. One of the critical things is where these preliminary drawings fit in with the town site plan ordinance. And we had a meeting this morning with Bill Shane, the Cumberland town manager, Oak Point, Jeff, and Scott and myself. And So we're going to see how this presentation goes tonight and what the board reaction is. And we've come up with what we think may be the next step, but it's going to be depending on your thoughts. And I guess at this point, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Oak Point.
Yeah, I'm going to turn over to Tyler to introduce, but I just wanted to add that after Tyler's done, I'm also going to just present very briefly some ideas for the campus plan. I know that the facilities committee was very interested in making sure that the board had some concrete ideas to at least consider in the next few months prior to putting something forth at a referendum. And so tonight I'm just going to introduce some ideas that you've all heard of, but just put it in one place as to looking, kind of at campus planning as well. And these are things that the board may want to consider or may not want to consider, but just, kind of putting these ideas that we've talked about in the air sometimes and putting it in one place so that you can see that and start to consider those things. So after Tyler and the team from Oak Point go through the school piece, I'll kind of give you a little bit broader perspective on how this fits into some potential campus planning that the board might want to look at.
But what we'll do before Jeff does that is give the board a chance to comment and ask Oak Point questions on the school itself. So back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll just ask Tyler if you want to introduce your team or kind of go from there.
Yeah, happily. So my name is Tyler Barter. I'm an architect and project manager with Oak Point, and I am joined tonight with by our team. Sarah Smith is an interior designer and space planner and educational planner with Oak Point. Rob Tillotson is here as well. He is an architect and engineer and the president of Oak Point. Allison Town DiMatteo is here. She's a landscape architect. And Jack Agnon is also, I think, was not able to get into the meeting, but is listening live. So he is our civil engineer. And I'm going to Does our presentation pop up? Great. So I wanted to take a quick minute to introduce what we're going to talk about tonight. As Peter and Jeff had mentioned, we're really at the beginning of this concept design process. So a lot of what you're going to see tonight are really the beginnings of some diagrammatic concepts of how this site might work. They're going to indicate some of the rough massing, how we're going to transition between floors, how a lot of the on-site circulation is going to work. That's really one of the most critical pieces that we're dealing with on your campus. As you know, with the number of buildings and facilities you have here, and then a projected increase in population, this is something that we're very sensitive about. So tonight is less about trying to hone in on, grade level organization and what buildings are going to look like and exactly how your site is going to be, and really more trying to understand some of the implications of decisions that we're going to be asking you to make as we go forward through this process. So we wanted to start off and talk a little bit about the goals. I know you're very aware of the needs that you have going forward, but I thought it was important for those listening to understand that we're talking about a roughly 450 student school. This is going to serve pre-K through 1 and be located on the campus. We're looking to build as much flexibility long-term for the district as we can. So we've really taken a hard look at your enrollment projections, really dialed in on what the projected needs are for the next 10 years and trying to set you up for a lot of long-term flexibility across your 4 buildings. We're looking to make sure that we're improving on-site circulations for both pedestrians and vehicular circulation. That's really a critical thing as we're starting to transition people in and out, 4 bus drop-offs, 4 parent drop-offs, same thing in the afternoon. So that's really an important piece. We're looking to make sure that this school is meeting those 21st century educational guidelines, that we're really focusing in on some of those small group instruction spaces, providing breakout areas, and really giving you a lot of flexibility as educational models are starting to change over the years. And then another big thing is making sure that, especially with this age group, that we're providing some really good on-site outdoor play and learning areas. So trying to take advantage of some of the natural features of the property that you're looking to acquire. So Allison, feel free to jump in if I stray too far, but one of the first things that we've done is kind of taking a look at what your overall parking and access is going to be throughout the site. So what you'll see here is your 4 major access points, 2 at the high school, 1 for the middle school, 1 for Mableye, and then also the parking as you kind of move around the site. That's really going to start to form the basis of how we analyze this site and make sure that we're going to be improving these situations going forward. For a point of reference, this is the piece of property adjacent to the superintendent's office that is, I believe, currently under contract, being identified as an expansion zone for this school. When we couple that with the superintendent's lot, that parking lot, and then also the current access road, it really gives us a really good opportunity to begin to carve up a piece of land that's going to be appropriate for not an insignificant sized building. With 450 kids, we're still looking at, a fairly robust educational program that we need to fit on an already pretty congested site. So this has really been a fantastic boost to this project. I think it would have been much more challenging trying to find a piece of land to drop a school on without this. So this is overall pretty good. Moving forward, one of the things that I think it was very helpful for us as we went out and did some preliminary walks around the site is to note that there's a pretty significant grade change. I think you've all experienced it as you transverse from the lower parking lot near the administrative offices and Mableye up to the high school. From that point, there is about a 22-foot grade difference from down here. What you see on the left-hand side here, that's the corner of Mableye. This is the road. You can see the track transitioning up to the parking lot next to the Performing Arts Center. That 22 feet of grade difference really gives us an opportunity to do some fun things on the site. What our overall approach to this is that somewhere down on that lower area, that U-shaped piece between Mableye and Tuttle Road, that's really going to serve as our access point on a lower level. And what our thought is that the building can really serve to transition some of that grade change. As you move around from top left, kind of clockwise, gives you a little bit of an idea on how that mass will go. As you look on this side, there's a small retaining wall. The building loops around. This is all 2-story in the front. And then as you head up that access road, the building starts to kind of compress into the site and transition to a 1-story building. So all of that upper level is where the educational wing is going to be housed. So all of the K and 1 classrooms are going to be located on that level. That gives a really good opportunity for an outdoor play and learning, kind of separated from the your connection road between the upper and lower parts of campus. It really creates a protected part of the site, using that building to help break down the site into some different zones. And by stepping down the scale of the building, it gives a really good opportunity to make it a little bit more appropriate for some of your youngest learners. Quick idea on how we would break this up. And again, these are really diagrammatic. This is something that is more of a proof of concept that this will actually fit on your site. And we've got a couple different kind of versions that we've been looking at. We've called this one the Plus, which is primarily based on the organization of the classroom wings. But what we would try to do in this building is try to group as many of your public functions on the lower level. So when you come in, you would have administrative, a secure entrance, which is critical for our school populations these days, cafeteria, the gymnasium, music and art, all located on that level. One of the things that would give you an opportunity for is to use this for community events in the evening if the district chose to do that. So planning that zone, separating it up from the general classroom wings above. On this level, we would also try to put the pre-K and an outdoor play and learning area dedicated to them. So trying to keep them from having to make that one flight up trek throughout the day. The other piece we've got on this option, and something that would need to be vetted as we begin to work with your school leadership, is keeping some of your special education on that lower level as well. As you move up, you see the 2 staircases would be your primary up. So we'd have a really nice kind of grand stair as you come in, give a chance for some kids to go immediately up. First graders can continue on the corridor and use the second stair, trying to break that population up a little bit. And then we've got 3 individual wings, and this is that plus that I was talking about. The first blue one is first grade. Moving in, the next wing becomes kind of that flex wing. There's 4 kindergarten, 4 first grade, and those would be able to be changed back and forth year to year based on the overall population. And then moving into another K wing at the end. Throughout all of the options, we're looking at small group instruction spaces. That's that purple color. And again, these are things that we'll be working with your administrative team and Jeff to make sure that we're really identifying what the overall needs are in their locations. The outdoor play and learning area would be kind of in that back area. And this gives us a great opportunity to provide some access from library spaces and different points along the corridor to really give a good connectivity to the outside. And there is going to be a lot of buffering between this piece of property and the adjacent residential zone. So, introducing some new vegetation and other things on the site. Oh, I think we've missed a site plan. Sorry, I've got one slide out of order. And with that, Allison, do you want to hop in to talk a little bit about the site circulation?
Sure. Are you going to share the?
Oh, sorry.
So like Tyler was talking about a couple of minutes ago, when we plan sites for new schools, there are really 4 different things that are, or 5 different things that we're working with that have to work with each other, but also work independently. The first 2 are drop-off areas. So obviously bus circulation and parent circulation are 2 really important circulation needs for vehicles, but they need to be kept separate for safety reasons. We've got parking needs for both staff and visitor parking for an elementary school. We've got service area considerations. If there's cafeteria, deliveries need to be made. Where does that service happen? Where does, where are the dumpsters? Where's the sort of back of house? And then lastly, we are working with outdoor play and learning environments, outdoor gathering spaces. So all of those things come together on the site. When we have a campus situation, that really gets taken up a notch in the sense that we have to consider the effects of all of these things, not only independently with the school, but how they affect the campus. So this plan shows the Mabel I, some of the middle school track area, and then the potential new site. Like Tyler said, we're kind of, we're learning as we go in terms of going back and forth between developing ideas for the building, seeing how they work on the site. This is a process. It's certainly very fluid process right now. So with the building that Tyler was just describing, one of the ideas that we had, right now, there's a connector road that basically goes next to the superintendent's office, in between the superintendent's office and parking lot and the Mabel I Wilson parent drop-off. In order to be able to create more room on the site for the new school, we're proposing a concept that shifts that connector road down on the site a little bit further east, which actually aligns with the street across Tuttle Road, which is a better planning practice in terms of traffic planning and engineering. So that's positive. But one thing it would do is it would essentially force the need to be able to relocate the parent loop for Mabel I Wilson. So on this diagram, the red arrows are proposed parent loop circulation. The pink arrows are proposed bus loop circulation, and the purple boxes are proposed parking areas for each of those 2 schools, and the blue arrows are through traffic. So right now what we're looking at is a parent loop for the new school that loops from the connector road between the middle and the high school, and can be accessed from several different points, not just one point. The parent loop for the Mabel I would move into what is currently the bus loop. We're also considering a bus loop for the new school that comes in front of the main entrance towards the Tuttle Road side of the site. That bus exit might also be shared with a service entrance that would be able to be co-located. And the bus loop for Mabel I is something that we're sort of toying around with, and one concept is to do sort of an inline bus drop-off that would have to be completely separated from the through traffic, but could potentially do sort of a parallel drop-off slip lane for buses at Mabel I. We'd need to rearrange the play spaces over there to be able to accommodate enough of a play area. So that's sort of still under development. That's really kind of in a nutshell the site plan that is being developed alongside that concept that Tyler just showed.
So the other option that we were starting to take a look at is one that we've called the kind of the S curve, and it's one that follows the roadway coming down between the two schools, and it has a very similar approach to the other two. So again, entering on that lower level. This one, I think the big difference here is utilizing the building a little bit differently to kind of break that higher level with an interior courtyard space, which would be somewhat of a nice space adjacent to both your cafeteria and music and art. Give you an opportunity to have some outdoor play and learning on that lower level as well as the upper. Again, these are both things that are doing the very same thing. So as you move up that access road, it starts to transition to that one-story building. And then you end up again with that really nice play and learning zone on the upper level, broken from the roadway by the building. This is a quick floor plan of how something like this would function. So again, entering at that main level, we'd keep all your public spaces on that lower level, pre-K, some special education classroom, some service zones as well. And then as you move up, again, slightly different arrangement, but stairs on both sides that begin to give you that vertical circulation through the building. On the upper level, this one's a little bit different, where it breaks down into 4 classroom pods instead of the larger 8. Again, these are both some different concepts that we're playing around that give some opportunity for your administrative team to weigh in on how we distribute programs. So in all of these, we've got small group learning spaces broken out. On these, we end up with these nice zones that give you small group and possibly some additional special education. And on all of them as well, we're going to have ample staff bathrooms, staff workrooms broken up and spread out amongst the rest of the building to provide some good connectivity there and eliminate that need to come down to the central office. Again, with the last one, this one would also provide access out to an outdoor play and learning area on that upper level from either quarters, the library, and other areas that could be kind of that desire line out to those types of spaces. Let Allison describe the site circulation here.
And I should say that the site circulation is not necessarily tied to one concept or the other. They could potentially either one work with either building. This is a little bit different from the circulation that was paired with those 3D massings that Tyler just showed. But with this one, the connector road between Tuttle and the drive that goes from the middle school to the high school is a little bit different in that with this concept, we're sort of looking at the idea of actually shifting that road, and you can see in that light blue line that has an arrow on both ends, shifting it so that it actually would remove one of the straightaways at the end of the track. The track has 2 straightaways, the longer of the 2, and would relocate the throwing area to be able to get a road that pulls a little bit further away from Mabel I and the new school site. And what that might allow us to do is to locate a shared bus loop that you can see in the pink that might serve both the new school as well as Mabel I. The green arrow is that relocated connector road between Tuttle and the middle school, high school campus. And one thought that we had was that potentially from a policy and operations standpoint, that road could be a through road most of the day, except for the time when the elementary schools are doing drop off and pickup, at which time it would shift to having that shared bus loop on one end. And on the other end would allow for in the red arrows, a longer entrance and sort of horseshoe parent drop off loop at the new school. One of the things we've heard is there are a lot of parents who pick up and drop off. So we don't want to shortchange the ability to queue for a parent loop. So we're trying to create opportunities for longer potential queuing areas. So you can see that on this plan. The Mabel I loop is still shown as being over on the where the bus loop is for Mabel I. And then the parking areas that are being proposed are really shown in the same areas as within the previous concept. Again, just throwing some ideas out there and seeing how that might work operationally for you and what we might be able to do from a space planning standpoint.
So Tyler, so does that pretty much cover your presentation at this point?
It does.
Just a couple of other things before the questions that either plan or the overall plan will require the removal and possible relocation of the administrative buildings, and it's still basically up in the air if those offices are relocated within the campus or something else. We're still looking at it. One of the things that we're looking into, since it is kind of a sensitive thing, that we are going to have a meeting with the Historical Society, or at least the chairman of it, Steve Moriarty, to see if they're interested in the building. But whatever, that it's not going to be there. It's either going to be somewhere else in town. It may be on the campus. We're still looking at that, but it's got to go. The other little hooker in this is that there's a possibility that we may be able to get some additional adjacent land going back toward the Wyatt property. And what that would do is eliminate a lot of the buffering issues that we're going to have on this, and also take care of maybe some future issues. So before the questions came in, I just wanted to put those additional things in there. And at this point, Chairman Tyler, I don't know how to do this hand and feet and raising and all this other stuff, so I'll kind of let you take over identifying folks that have questions.
Sure. So Mike Williams, go for it. I'll just follow the hands as they come up.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. And thank you, Oak Point, Tyler, and team, and Peter for being our fearless leader here. Just a quick question about, so I seeing that certainly appreciate the challenge in trying to figure out the traffic flows and the bus loops and the parent loops and, the flow throughs and such. One thing though that just is a flag of concern for me is just seeing losing potential outdoor space and play space at Mabel Wilson, as well as that block of shade trees. When Tyler McGinley and I walked the campus in August to try to figure out outdoor learning spaces, it was quite noticeable the dearth of shade our campus has. And so losing shade trees, that would just be problematic. Understanding, so if we need to put something there, just flagging that we should replace that, and more so in other places. But also, again, you'd be going right through Tuttletown, or we'd be going through Tuttletown with that. And so just if there was thinking about replacing that, and so we don't actually lose play space, there's a ball field at Mabel Wilson that's rarely used. And so just thinking through of how we can replace that.
Well, the other thing too is, Mike, that the portable classroom will be going bye-bye also.
That is definitely helpful. But even with that, I would hope to not lose it.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to mention is that we've kind of started at the hardest part of the site, I think, trying to really identify what this school is going to take and how some of that circulation is going to go. And we're going to kind of work our way toward Mabel I. You'll see a lot of the site circulation changes there are going to require some changes to the entrance at Mabel I. You're currently coming in at the access road and kind of down into that center corridor. And we're going to be looking at something that might be more of a straight shot through the building, kind of connecting to where the playground is now to the existing bus loop. So as we work our way toward that part of the site, I think some of those things will become a little bit more apparent how they'll be dealt with, and be a lot more opportunity for discussion as well. So these are great points. Thank you.
Okay. Now is your time to raise your hand. All right, Margot. You're muted, Margot.
That was my warm up for myself. You mentioned common spaces in the new school. What would those be? Is it a smaller gym, cafeteria, library?
Yes. So, in our preliminary discussions with leadership, the need for a library is clear. We've got it on an upper level, trying to keep it in the heart of the educational wing. So that's definitely one space. A cafeteria is another. They're looking at a much smaller gymnasium space. We've kind of called a few of these things like the not gym. It's really not going to be a middle school sized gym with basketball courts in a traditional sense, but really the active motor play area inside the building. So it may look a little bit different than a typical space. So those will all be on those lower levels. We've also kept some of those other functions like music and art on the lower level that, depending on how the community decides to use this building after hours, it gives you some flexibility. And it may be decided that, that whole back section gets shut down and use only a part of it. So these are all discussions that we'll want to have as we start to proceed into the more detailed analysis of the space and the adjacency.
In your earlier designs, you had a room that was sort of like a indoor amphitheater, kind of common place for plays and things like that. Is that not being considered because it's a smaller school and there's more outdoor focus? Or
well, I think we have not fully finalized all of the program spaces in here. So what we've tried to do is build out some footprints that let Allison and Jack really dive into some of the site challenges, but also give us flexibility so that as we start, this next step, that we can identify is the amphitheater more important than 2 or 3 smaller breakout rooms, and we can start to consolidate those. So I would say nothing that you've seen or have not seen tonight is set in stone. So, these are all great things. So, if the amphitheater is a priority, we'll certainly find ways to introduce those to the building. And there will be some tough choices, I'm sure, throughout the process. It's still a fairly robust building program. So we'll be interested to see how those discussions go.
I will as well. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Tyler. My question is around, and maybe Jeff or someone from Mabel Wilson that's on this call can answer, is how many current kindergarten classrooms do we have and first grade? It appears in the 2 designs that it's between 11 and 12 classrooms that are being set up for the future school. And so I'm just curious as to where that plays into where we stand now, and what is the vision that this school will be able to support our numbers for how many years in the future is it a 5-year school, or are we looking more long-term? Thank you.
Yeah, those are good questions, Jennifer. And our enrollment projections really showed that we're going to max out in probably 8 to 10 years in the district, at least all the demographic enrollment projections that we had done by Planning Decisions and then by Rebecca Wandell, who followed up and did them again not too long ago. And so with that in mind, the maximum amount of students that we are expecting is 450. And it's really 400 with kindergarten and first grade. It looks like the largest class sizes that we would have would be around 200. And then with some pre-kindergarten in there, I think that's where we came up with the 450. I think the other thing I want to recommend to the board at some point is we just had the enrollment study updated in 2019, if you remember. And we may want to have it updated again as well as we continue going through the process. It just, as we're going through this, it would be nice to know that those numbers are going to hold. I think the pandemic right now has complicated things a little bit. But I'm thinking for kindergarten, with 200 students, we're talking about, 11 or 12 classrooms. So that would be right in the range. And the same thing with first grade, keeping those class sizes a little bit on the smaller side, which is typically what we've done in this district.
And Jeff, I think you probably saw that Corey chimed in that we're currently with, excuse me, 10 classes for kindergarten and 10 for first.
Right. And so next year we're, if projections are correct with kindergarten, we'll be around 200 in kindergarten, which will be the largest kindergarten we've had in many, many, many years. And with 200, we're going to probably need 12 classrooms for kindergarten next year.
So okay, and we don't have to get into the weeds here, but with that, what we're saying is if we build the school, we will max out when we move in because we're already going to be at those numbers.
Yeah, when we looked at the numbers, between, I think it was 3 and 4 years from now when the building would be built if it gets approved, there were also some smaller classes. So every year is not 200. And I can update the board with those projections that we had. So when we move into the building, it wouldn't necessarily be full. And that's what we had looked at previously, is that we wouldn't have 450 students for the first, couple of years that we move in. And that those numbers do go back and forth. But the maximum counts that we were showing in the next 8 to 10 years were 200 for a class, but not always 200. Sometimes below 200.
Kate?
I think Jennifer asks an important question about the flexibility of the building. I know Tyler Barter had talked about it being, a comprehensive longer term building. I just think that needs to be a priority as much as we can. So I would support revisiting some type of enrollment study to make sure that we're looking at the numbers like a third or fourth time, as close as we are to the project. I heard things that are important to me as a board member of preserving outdoor space, buffer zones, separating it from the residential area, making this building that's not a small school feel like it fits into the neighborhood feel that we already have, I think is important. I think people move to the center for a very specific reason, and I'd like to honor that as a board member, and just making sure it fits in with the landscape, which it sounds like it will. And I think the other plus that I've seen tonight is that some of the plans, they utilize space differently, but not so different that people are going to, not know where they're going or it's not going to be this huge monumental change. So it looks like we're moving in a great direction.
Mike Simmons.
Wow, Jeff, you just called a red day. Elias is going to be bummed. But at any rate, Yeah, I've participated on the building committee a couple of years back. And initially I favored a pre-K 1 school, but was persuaded to support a pre-K 2 school, in large part because of grade groupings and how that would fit into our other buildings. And so I'm wondering about the knockoff effects on now having a pre-K 1 school and what that will do to grade groupings and what that means for our other school buildings and how we might have to adjust for that.
Yeah, I can answer that really quickly. That's also in the follow-up presentation I'm going to be doing as some information, but basically with a pre-K 1 K1 building, you would then have a 2 through 4 building at Mabel Wilson School. That facility really should not have more than 3 grades in it in order to keep it comfortable with enrollment projections that we have. So making that what is right now a 4-grade building, and then you have pre-K, which I supposedly is 5 grades in that building, we would reduce the amount of students in that school down to 3 grades. So it would be a lot more comfortable for that building and certainly wouldn't be over capacity. The 5-8 would be at the middle school, which is currently 4-8 right now. And as you know, that building is getting very crowded and overcrowded. We're even considering modulars. If not the next year, a year after, we're probably going to have to seriously look at it. And so by reducing a grade in that building, it'll be a lot more comfortable and allow for some space at that building that currently is not available. So this plan really, I think, helps us to have the student numbers in our buildings, make it more comfortable for students and staff, and reduces the numbers in all of our facilities. High school would stay the same at this point, and there's been questions about, down the road, will the high school need to add space? That's something that we're looking at, but with a high school, you have a little more flexibility with scheduling. When a teacher is not teaching a class, you can schedule a class into that room for that block. So you do have a different way of looking at available space in a high school that you don't have in other buildings. So that's not really something that we'll analyze, but it's not an immediate need right now either.
Yeah, because part of this was we'd heard back then, we heard a lot from teachers and administrators that grouping 3, 4, 5 was a very natural group that was a good learning cohort, if you will, and that splitting 4, 5 up like that was less than ideal, and so that's part of why I was asking about too, because it seems like we're going to less natural learning pods.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always different schools of opinion on what grade configurations make sense, and there's been a lot of research, and whatever research you find, you could Google it or find it in any academic journal. There's never been a completely definitive answer to what grade spans really are effective or work or make a difference for kids. Honestly, there's just no answer to that. I mean, districts have played with grade spans and grade groupings. I agree that grades 3 to 5 is an ideal intermediate grouping for kids. Kids tend to be a little more common in those grade levels. But I don't think there is no research that says that there's any achievement gain or deficiency by putting certain grades together. So I think that it's just how we make it work. I think there's a lot of concern about the 4-8 model that we have, even though we have 2 separate and distinct areas in the 4-8 facility. We've made it work it's been 7 years with that building being that, in that configuration. A lot of people are very skeptical that it could ever work. And we made it work partly because we did a very good job. The administrators have done a great job there, making sure that the 2 schools are quite different. I think in a 5-8 middle school, there's opportunities to do the same kind of thing, especially with the layout of that particular facility. There's an opportunity to group 5th and 6th graders together in one part of the building in 7th and 8th grade in a 5-8 middle school, especially that facility lends itself to being able to do that. So I think there's opportunities for that to happen in that facility.
Mike, did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Kate, your hand is still raised. Did you have a follow-up?
No, but while I'm here, I think that Mike brought up some really important points. And I think, Jeff, you addressed them about being really careful and mindful about the grade considerations. I know we're limited to the space and the way the buildings need to be, but I like the preliminary thoughts of grouping 5 and 6. And I would really want to protect those 5th graders in terms of their curriculum and their social interaction. So again, I know we'll think about all of this down the road.
Thank you. I know Kevin had asked in the chat estimated square footage. Is that something, Tyler Barter, you could share for the
Yep.
two?
So estimated right now, we are looking at something in the range of 65 to 70,000 square feet.
Thank you. Before we move on to Jeff's presentation, I just want to make sure any other board members don't have any questions or comments for Oak Point. Okay.
Okay, before we do this, so here's where we are. The next step is that if the board is comfortable with this basic concept, we don't even know right now if we can do these specifically this way. If the board approves the kind of general concept, we now do need to get into the site plan weeds, which the 3 major ones at this point in time we're talking about our traffic flow. Bill Shane does indicate that he thinks he's comfortable with an additional curb cut on Tuttle Road, but interestingly enough, that's not the town's choice. Tuttle Road is a state road, so that the Department of Transportation has to bless that, but Bill thinks if the town pretty much recommends it, it'll happen. So one of the big things that we've got to look at, number one, are traffic patterns, which is going to require some work on the part of a traffic engineer. The second large one, it's not glamorous, but it's huge, and that's stormwater, which we have to see if the town's current stormwater things will handle this. Do we need to do retaining ponds or other things? Again, this stuff isn't glamorous, but if it isn't nailed down, we can't do this. And then, as Kate has indicated, the other one that has a lot of implications are buffering. There's a possibility we might have to do a retaining wall, which you can't buy at Kmart or Walmart at this case. And then the buffering adjacent to the neighbors, as Kate has pointed out, this might be easier if we can do this. One of the things that, again, if you go along with a basic concept, that Oak Point and probably the admin will be sitting down with Bill Longley, the code enforcement officer, Carla Nixon, the town planner, and Bill to just go over the next level of stuff. So at this point, I might call on Jeff and Scott Poulin as to where we stand with Oak Point and what we need to do. And after that, we do need the board saying, do we start delving into more of the technical stuff? So Jeff and Scott.
Yeah, I think we talked about this with Peter as well, is that we're going to get with Oak Point and just kind of come up with a rough new timeline between now and the referendum on things that need to get done. Obviously, we have a new process between now and then. When we were looking at the North Yarmouth site, we had a very different process and a different timeline. So we want to kind of solidify that. We also need to talk with our attorney from Drummond and Woodson, who specializes in getting school projects to referendum, Bill Stockmeyer. And he'll be just walking us through and making sure we've got all the legal steps, in place. So those are two things that we're going to want to do pretty quickly, and then go from there. But yeah, Peter's right. We kind of need the board tonight just to give us an idea if you think that we're going in the right direction with this, because as he indicated, there's a lot of things that we'll have to do. I think soil testing is another one that we might have to look at too, and make sure that the soil is fine, which we think it is, but we just have to check it. And so those are basic things that we want to make sure we get out of the way and clear any hurdles early before we go too far down the road here.
So Chairman Tyler, before we get into the concept thing, I think we need some direction from the board. Do we go to the next step?
Sure thing. All right, I'm just going to roll call through, and Peter, I'll start with you.
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin?
I guess I'm unclear what the question is.
Me as well. I'm unclear too.
Okay, just very simply, do we start doing the investigation as far as site plan, traffic, stormwater, buffering, all the things that we're going to need to do to say, is this concept possible, and to determine at least a basic cost on this. We kind of need this information, but we don't want to go down a rabbit hole if the basic concept isn't something that you're interested in.
Thanks for the clarification. So with that information, my question would be, obviously I am thinking about moving forward towards concept, but my question would be, of all those things that you ticked off, the cost associated with that, have we allocated funds currently to that? I remember what the agreement was with Oak Point, but I'm just wondering what funds would be necessary to move this to the next level.
Jeff and Scott?
Yeah, I'll defer to Scott on that. I know Scott has that information or is working on it. And I think that's one of the things that we need to talk to Oak Point about more, is exactly what's the depth of these, these investigations we need to do with the property and where this building would be on the property, and get those figures solidified. But Scott, you might have more of an idea.
No, Jeff, that's what we need to determine. We need to determine what those additional costs are going to be for any subcontractors working for Oak Point, and where we're at in our existing contract with Oak Point.
So I think what you're saying, Scott, is that we need to first, in the timeline of this things, get things nailed down with Oak Point, and then we would go into the next phase of preliminary investigations on these other site plan issues. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Oak Point is, and Rob can chime in, and so can Tyler, but they certainly utilize consultants on these items, and we just need to determine where that's heading. But that cost is, Peter, I really don't think that the soils test and the other things are really going to be a cost prohibitor to keep us from going forward if that's what people are interested in on this site. I think those will be things that we'll just have to, determine with Oak Point and just move it forward.
Does that answer your question, Kevin?
It answers the question. I just want to know that we have funds available for that.
Scott?
We will have funds available once we do the actual warrant article. When we come to our new district budget meeting, we'll have to basically allocate funds from undesignated fund balance to finish this project. But the only thing I could determine right now is we'd have to look at capital reserve and see if we can allocate funds from capital reserve for this purpose.
Okay. You all set now, Kevin?
I think it's something we do need to talk about at finance, though, Kevin.
Okay.
I think it's something that we should put on our agenda to have a further discussion about.
Sounds good.
Right, and I think that the funds should be capped at a certain level and be watched at this point too. And we can talk that through when we have a meeting.
Agree.
Yeah, it's Rob. We were asked today to meet with Scott and Jeff in the next few days to figure out what the direction is and and for us to get the costs from the consultants and get an idea of what the costs are going to be to get to the point where the town planner and those folks who will have enough information to allow us to move forward and give us the direction on what can happen and how it can happen on the site. And I think that's what the next step was. Jeff was to get together with you guys in the next couple of days.
And we have started pulling some of this information together, and we've gotten the traffic consultant's proposal, which is just over 10,000. That's probably one of the bigger ones that we're going to need at this point. Just for some point of reference, I'm working on Oak Point stuff now.
Sounds like process-wise, it would be good to bring this information to the finance committee, certainly the facilities committee as well, make sure they know, but the finance committee, and make sure this amount is okay. And notwithstanding the fact that this would be an okay amount to spend, I think we also just need to know if the board, if this concept plan and where the building would sit on the property is acceptable for us to move ahead with that.
Okay. I think it's just clearly understanding where we're at in Oak Point's contract now and then what we're allocating going forward.
Okay. So, Kevin, do you have any other comments or anything? Did you want to add anything else?
I don't know.
Okay. Margot?
I like so far what I've seen and what I can imagine based on the schematics. I guess in my mind's eye, I kind of like that the entrances perhaps would be moving more towards facing into the campus rather than out to the streets. And I think that could create a really nice, for both the Wilson School and for this school, whoever it will be named for, to have that kind of focus inward, because the students really do use all that space in the middle a lot, rather than having it be focused on the road. So I guess I like the concepts. I will be interested to see when choices are made, what they might be, but I support the overall concept.
Thank you, Margot. Anne?
I support moving forward. I do want us to keep in mind the size of the school. I am concerned that how it's presented, that we'd run out of space when we move in. And I don't think I have anything to mention that anyone else hasn't already, but that's my biggest concern, is making sure that that we are really looking long-term and not just short-term. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. I'm just going to go next because I'm in the, and this is how it is on this list. I'd like to say that, I've had a chance in the facilities committee that we've gone over this pretty much in the same format. And I just want to say thank you to Scott for reminding us that the costs that are associated with kind of taking that next step are not something that's going to keep us from taking that next step. We just have to put the numbers on, we need to put the numbers to each one of those action steps. And I appreciate, Kevin, the question, but also appreciate your response, Scott. So that was helpful. I'm supportive of moving forward and appreciative of both of the designs for lots of different reasons. And I look forward to how we can kind of clean up our ins and outs throughout the whole campus at the same time. Kate Perrin.
I am supportive of moving forward at this time. I think that we've spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different possibilities, and I'm pleasantly surprised at the direction of these possibilities in the new land. So I'm sure that everyone on finance will figure this one out.
All right, Mike Simmons.
I don't have anything particularly new to add. I mean, they're interesting concepts. They seem to fit well on the space. Like Anne, I am a little worried about the space for future expansion. It looks like we might be cutting it close. But we're early stages, so we'll see how this goes.
Thank you, Mike. Jennifer?
I support moving forward with getting the information for the site, for the ground and soils and traffic. I hope that the board is then going to be pulled in the next step when it comes to more discussions on the building and the concept in that process. And I hope that that's what this vote is just with making sure that we can put a building on that property, and then we can be grouped in, and I know facilities is overseeing it, but be grouped in on what the next step of what the structure will be like.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mike Williams?
Yeah, I definitely support moving forward. I think there's been some good thought put forward already. Certainly a lot of details to work out. One, and I promised you, Peter, I'd mention this every time I could, but I would love in the next phase to how we figure out integrating solar power into this building, as well as other significantly energy efficient efforts. But yeah, I support moving forward.
Thank you. Elias?
Yeah, I'm definitely in support. And I think, just echoing what Mike just said, a very exciting opportunity to have. Obviously, it's a big undertaking for the taxpayers and just an investment, but to think about crafting the most modern, efficient, and just overall engaging work environment wise for our K through 2 students in our district, I think is a very exciting task ahead. And it is unfortunate in a sense that, or not unfortunate, but I think there was so much hope with the North Yarmouth campus, and obviously when that fell through, what are you going to do? But the one campus model, I think, no, you can't complain with being able to keep that a central part of Cumberland and just MSAD 51 as a whole. So I think that's very exciting. And moving, I think functionality is a big thing to keep in mind to make sure this building has a purpose throughout its time of use, whether it be swallowing obviously the increasing enrollment, and maybe when the trend is down in our enrollment, strong support and looking forward to just looking into more and more of the details and how to make the school as great as possible.
Thank you, Elias. And lastly, Madison.
Yeah, I'm definitely in support of moving forward. I think COVID or not, more space, less claustrophobia. And I think it's good for increasing school size. Of course, I don't know all the logistics. I've never had to build a school before. So I'm sure there's a lot more that we need to focus on before we can actually move into this. But I think it's an exciting opportunity. So I definitely support it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Jeff, I will pass this off to you as you have kind of a follow-up presentation for a larger perspective on the campus. And I don't know, Oak Point, if you're staying with us through this or not, but I just want to say thank you in advance.
Tyler,
You're very welcome.
Just one thing before Jeff starts that I'm sorry, Oak Point, I'll get back. To just let Jennifer know and everybody else that there's going to, as we get further down, there's going to be a parallel track where, and it's already starting, where, you know, teachers, staff, administrators, and such will be weighing in as we get into the quote weeds as far as what the rooms are, what they do, and all that. That there will be a significant amount of input from the folks that are using it. So at this point in time, we're just going through this stuff, but there is a parallel track so that
Cumberland and just MSAD.
It isn't done in a vacuum. Sorry, Jeff and Oak Point.
No, thanks, Peter. No, I mean, there's a lot to do between now and June, basically. So there'll be a lot of work that continues in different ways, but to make this project work. But we are going to keep the board in the loop all the way along. We'll give you updates. Might come back and do another workshop, in a month or two. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little more information about that as well. But I wanted to thank Oak Point for being here tonight, and feel free to leave if you don't want to stick around. You probably already have this information anyway, so it's up to you. But thank you for being here. We appreciate it, all the information.
Well, thanks for having us. I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
All right. Can you see the Can you see my screen at this point?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. That's good. So basically, these are just ideas that I'm putting into one place tonight. It doesn't mean that these are things that the district needs to do, the board needs to do. These are just considerations for the board to consider as we kind of look at the one campus model in a holistic way. And just, and I'm gonna go pretty briefly. I'm cognizant of time at this point, but getting back to the strategic plan, this is one quadrant of the plan, which is the early childhood education, the critical building block part of the strategic plan, so it's aligned. And basically from that plan, from the strategic plan, is the facilities, K-5 facilities. It's really pre-K-5 facilities at this point. Reviewing the district's long-term educational program for elementary students, including the structure, options for 3- and 4-year-olds, optimal grade spans, and facilities that make allowances for projected enrollment over the next decade. And I know you've seen this before, but pre-COVID, we had 692 students at Mabel I. Wilson School. If we continue down this track within about 5 or 6 years, at Mabel I. Wilson School, we would be somewhere around 850 students in that building, way over capacity. The capacity of that school really to handle, any amount of students is probably around 550 is the optimal maximum for that building. So next year, just to give you an idea, the projected enrollment it could be as high as 738 students. If the students that are being homeschooled come back, that went to private schools, et cetera, as part of the pandemic, and if we get the kindergarten enrollment that we are projected to get, which is around 200 for next year, we could certainly be around, that 738 mark if that all goes as projected. So certainly, I guess the long and short of it is the enrollment continues and will continue to grow at the lower grades. So how do we get here? I won't go through all this, but many of you have been, participants in this entire process. But as part of the strategic plan and in conjunction with enrollment projection reports that had been done previously by planning decisions, and then Rebecca Wandell as a follow-up in 2019. A steering committee was convened, and from there was a building committee, and the board approved the recommendation for a new primary school off campus. Obviously, that was pre-COVID, and then as a result of COVID, a lot of things changed. Obviously, we went off grid for a few months in terms of talking about this particular project, and then there was a resuming of the process when we came back to school this year. There was another property search that was put out, and then there was a property offer that came forward this past fall that you obviously went under contract for, and now we are at the stage of looking at the concept design based on the potential new property that still needs to be approved by voters as part of this process. So in terms of looking at campus planning, this is just a summary, and again, these are really very rough ideas, mostly coming from me. Scott's looked it over as well. We've just kind of worked on it, but primarily just kind of throwing this out, looking at priorities, and being able to prioritize what would need to happen on the campus in order for the campus to be optimal for all of our students and projected enrollments going forward in the next several years. So priority one obviously is what you heard tonight: a new primary school, pre-K to 1, and in order to do that, the voters need to approve the land purchase that has been offered, and then obviously the construction of a 450 student school. And I talked earlier about what that would mean for the other facilities in terms of optimal grade spans, and I say optimal in terms of numbers of students and staff comfortably being in those facilities. So as part of priority one also is looking at Maple I. Wilson School, and I think it's up to the board on the range of work that can be done at that building. I mean, there is possibility of just saying, the school is in good shape to turn over to grades 2 to 4 with nothing else to be done. We have done a lot of work in that building over the last few years, whether it's upgrading systems, putting heat pumps with air conditioning in, but there is still work to be done in that building. Some of it is modernizing that wing that faces Tuttle Road. Looking at there's been discussions about moving the office to the other end of the building. Obviously the playground certainly needs work. Also for a grades 2 to 4 building, a playground needs to be adequate for those grades. Some retrofitting for grades 2 to 4, although the school has been for years working for up to grade 3. So, but considering that there will be no kindergarten and first grade in this building, there will be some retrofitting of some classrooms that will need to get done in order to make this more comfortable for that grade span. The gym has been, a discussion item. Do we need to do something with the gym? Does it need to be enlarged? Is it the right size gym for that school, or do we just leave it alone? These are just ideas that have come up. And then obviously small group space, and how do we make that work within the existing facility? I think also under priority one, and this is all kind of part of the same package in my mind anyway, is obviously the superintendent's office has to be moved. So what do we do? We had a discussion this morning with Bill Shane. There is some historic value to the Sweetser building. And that's why Peter mentioned that we really need to talk to the Historical Society and see what their interest is in the Sweetser building. But the cost of moving that building, for us to move that building, would be expensive if we're moving it to another part of the campus. And do we really want to incur that expense, and is it worth keeping that building, or should we look at other options for housing the district offices? We don't need a huge amount of space for that. Is there a possibility of tacking, a little bit of space onto the new building, or can we look at the middle school where there would be more room, at least for temporarily, and put the superintendent's offices over there as an interim. So I think those are discussions that obviously we haven't gotten to in any depth, but I think those are things that we need to make sure as part of this new school building project that we want to keep on the radar. Looking at other priorities that have, these are discussions that all of you have, I know are familiar with, or these are things that have been circulating, but there has been a long time interest in an artificial turf field. And if we're looking at committing ourselves to a one campus model for the long term, which this would obviously do by building the school on the campus, having more access for playing time, space, extending the fall and spring seasons, and eliminating transportation to Twin Brook, and being able to run 2 practices on a field, and being able to use a field a lot more than we do with the game field, for example, that we don't use that much because it gets damaged pretty quickly, and we're constantly having to maintain it. An artificial turf field would be a good way of keeping our commitment to a one campus model and really improving the campus overall for access for student athletes and for community groups, and really opening up that space for better use with the facilities that we have on campus. Another priority, and I listed it as, again, this is just kind of my thinking, but priority 3 would be renovating the maintenance in the field house. Kind of goes along with the turf field, but at the same time, we've mentioned this many times over the years, that having maintenance equipment in half of the field house is not safe, and it also takes up a good portion of the current field house, where that space could be used for other things such as putting bathrooms in, expanding the weight room, and doing more with some sort of fitness if we're going to put that long-term in the field house. So those are ideas that have come up repeatedly in the past. I'm just kind of putting it in one place. And then the fourth, priority 4 would be to look at the high school. I think we still need to look at the enrollment down the road. Really, high school is in fairly good shape, but there's areas that were never done 15, 18 years ago when the renovation to Greeley High School was completed. The areas that did not get any attention at the time, excuse me, were the pool, the library, the math and science wings got some attention, but really weren't completely brought up to, what we consider modern classrooms for the 21st century. The commons was not touched. And then the cafeteria, we've certainly done a lot of work on the current cafeteria, but we never completed that project in terms of putting windows in, et cetera. So, is there some work that needs to be done at the high school? And it's just, being completely transparent and saying that we don't need to do any work there. I think it's all about priorities, and is that something that we want to make sure that we've put out there in the open and been transparent about, and said these are things that we might want to do. And I also just want to point out that these priorities can be, it's up to the board to decide what goes on a referendum and what's part of a package. What is included in a referendum package. If you move forward with that referendum in September, what do you want to include in that particular thing? Are you just putting the primary school forward? Are you looking at doing things at Wilson School, the district office? Are you interested in including the turf field? And I know a lot of this also comes down to cost, and how much is all of this going to cost, and what makes sense to put forward as a referendum package. And those are all conversations the board will certainly need to have, and before you make a final decision in a few months about what you are going to be doing and what you're planning to approve or not. So just to this is, I'm kind of a bit visual person, so I put some of the ideas that I just talked about in more of a visual way, if this helps, or maybe it doesn't. But just starting up here with the high school renovation, we're really talking about this end of Greeley High School, and looking and making sure that we modernize it if that's something that the board has any interest in, or at least telling voters this is something down the road that we might need to do or we'd like to do, and as part of a larger plan for the campus, for campus improvement. So this was, again, the maintenance building is right here, and where does this need to be expanded in order to accommodate where maintenance equipment is currently being housed, which is in the field house, along with the maintenance building. We've got maintenance equipment in both places, and just kind of clearing this field house out so that it truly is for athletic purposes and not for maintenance. The turf field, if there was a turf field, and again, this really involves more discussions. The athletic advisory committee has been very involved in this topic, as you know, on and off for years, and certainly would want to participate and give feedback to the board on this if you wanted to move forward, but would theoretically be here where the game field is currently located. The new school, obviously, that we're proposed new school that Oak Point presented tonight would be in this land if the voters approve the property that's under contract for being acquired. That necessitates, obviously, the superintendent's office, which is right here, being relocated in order to make the school project work. And then the MIW renovation, again, I think it's really the front part of the building. Seems to be where a lot of the work was not completed when the building was added on to 25, 30 years ago. That part of the building was kind of left and still needs some work. I put this here, and I think this is, I really almost want to take it off at this point. This was probably a week ago or a few days ago anyway when I was working on this, and we kind of got a better answer from the town of Cumberland today that, about the Sweetser building, but I had at one point thought, could we move the Sweetser building here in this area of the campus by the middle school? But the more information we got today, I think it's really not worth even looking at that or considering something like that. I think it's pretty expensive. So finally, this would just be a draft roadmap. And this, again, can be looked at by the facilities committee, the board. These are just, again, ideas. The first 5 have actually already been done. Property has been secured. It's under contract to help with the one campus model. The concept design obviously has been worked on by Oak Point, which you saw tonight. Facilities committee did review it. And there's been at least a couple of consultations with the town of Cumberland now about this, and we have more to go in order to make sure that there's no big glaring issues, which, at this point, we're not seeing any. The board workshop is tonight, obviously. The next step would be for the facilities and building committee. And I think, Peter, that's probably another discussion we want to quickly have before tonight's over, is just to talk about, what would the board like to see with the building committee? We still have a building committee that's in place, but that was for a different purpose, and have things shifted enough that building committee probably is not the one that we're going forward with. Do we need a different model, or how does that look? Staff input. Staff will certainly have input in a concept design that gets approved by the board in the end. We need to have their voices. The leadership team at Mabel Wilson School did look at some potential ideas, not a concept design yet, but ideas for what a primary school might have for an interior. It was a very short discussion, but they did have a chance to kind of weigh in and see some ideas. They'll certainly have a lot more input in the months ahead. Again, looking at a completed concept design with more information and voices in the process. hopefully somewhere around April, if we're trying to stay on track for a referendum in September. And then in there, we'd be talking to Oak Point about facilitating a couple of public informational meetings before the board does a final approval for going to referendum. That will be important as well, just giving the public more information. And then the board obviously needs to set a referendum if you choose to do so, and you're comfortable with the final concept design. That would go to voters probably somewhere in June. And again, we need to get more information from Drummond and Whitson and make sure we have all the legal steps in place. But that would be right now just a draft to kind of give you a visual. How do we get there from here? So I'll stop sharing and go back.
It's the same thing, Tyler, Chairman, if you can kind of coordinate the questions or comments on this.
Sure. Does anyone want to raise their hand, and I can just run through any comments or questions people might have with what Jeff just presented? And also, I think it's important if anybody has any feedback about the building committee that Jeff had mentioned a minute ago. Now is your time at 9:05 at night to give us your best thoughts on everything you just heard. All right, Margot.
I don't know if these will be my best thoughts or not, but I did sit in on a bunch of the original building committee meetings for the building site in North Yarmouth, and I think the makeup of that group was really good. Topics were raised that I would not have thought of. So I hope that going forward, if it's not those people, that it is a good cross-section of representation, so we can hopefully hear things that we need to hear early in the process, not late in the process. As far as how people feel about things, what the pulse is in North Yarmouth, and all that. I think learning more sooner is always good. I know the turf field has been talked about for a really long time. When I see the aerial shots of our campus, I see other fields, and I know that Twin Brooks is also used for our athletics. So it would be helpful for me to know what fields are used for what sports for which seasons, and really, I know what the case is for the turf field, but I want to be able to say to other people when it looks like there's all this usable land around, why we might choose to do something like that. So I don't know if that's something that Dave Shapiro could put together for us, or if it's really the different schools use different fields for gym, or I don't know, but that would be helpful for me to know. And I'll think of more questions, but I'll get them to you later.
Thank you, Margot. Anne?
I just, well, one thing kind of related to what Margo was saying regarding the other options that we might want to add to the referendum. I'm wondering how soon we would maybe get like cost estimates for any of those. And then also just wanted to volunteer that I'm open to serving on the building committee if needed.
Thank you, Anne. Jeff, do you have an answer to, or even Scott, when we might be able to have some sort of round numbers associated with some of those recommendations?
I think we can get those. I think, Oak Point is going to have to do some of the testing first to get a solid answer on the building project. I think we have, we can get a ballpark figure. I don't think it would take very long to do that. I think they already have a round idea of what it might cost to build a building. I think they just want to make sure that they aren't missing anything at this point. The turf field, I've seen different numbers about what a turf field is. It really depends on the quality that you're getting. And it would be good for David to come and kind of talk about the field use in general, and then the turf field, since he's been very involved in those conversations, along with Eliza Miller, who's the chair of the athletic advisory committee, would probably be both of them would be good to have. I've heard anywhere from, 1.5 to 2 million for a quality turf field to install one that lasts, a dozen to 15 years. So I think that's, I don't know if that's still accurate. There's also been a lot of improvements in turf fields in terms of the health. There were some real concerns a number of years ago about how healthy is a turf field, but my understanding is, and I'm not an expert on turf fields, but there's been a lot of work done on making turf fields healthier in the last 5 years or so, and we want to hear from David and Eliza on that a little bit more. But I think it's fair to say it's somewhere in the 1.5 to 2 million, depending on the quality, and it really depends. Every turf field's a little different, so 2 million I think would be a pretty probably upper line of a turf field.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to? I mean, we can always ask questions at a future date, but while we're all here and the topic's on the table, does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Okay, I'm seeing none. Jeff, Peter, go ahead.
Just following up with Margot, I think Margot makes a pretty good point. I would not be adverse to retaining the building committee that we have. I mean, they put a lot of effort in, and I think we'd cause more problems than we solved. So I think once we get a little further down, maybe once Oak Point goes a little further with the information, that at that point we can convene the building committee. Also, the faculty will have had a chance to weigh in a little bit. So I guess to answer Jeff's and follow up with Margot, I wouldn't. Oh, I can't say that, Ann. I don't have any problem of if Jeff doesn't and the board of just reconstituting the building committee at some point.
Thank you, Peter. I agree. I think that we should at least offer those that were interested and that participated and volunteered their time to join back in. And my guess is that there will be some that maybe life has changed quite a bit since last time we met, so that they won't be available. So hopefully,
definitely. Again, I agree with Margot to re-engage the North Yarmouth folks too.
Yep, that's a great point. Okay, I don't see anybody else's hand raised or hand waving. Jeff, do you need anything else from us at this moment?
No, I mean, it sounds like everyone's okay with moving forward. I think that this, one point that we need to get more information to the finance committee, certainly, and obviously the facilities committee, is just the cost of Oak Point. But notwithstanding those costs, and just getting more information to both committees to look at and make sure they're comfortable with it. Especially the finance committee, we would be moving forward with Oak Point. Continuing the process and just outlining the activities. So there's a lot of work that has to be done between now and June. And it also sounds like we would basically reconvene the building committee that was in place, ask people if they would like to continue. If not, that's okay. We might need to find different people for roles, but generally speaking, try to find the building committee that was there and have them come back into the process. And bring them up to speed with Oak Point on the new concept design, and kind of go from there. So a lot of things will be happening, probably more quickly now. We'll be having all kinds of things like the staff getting involved. So there'll be side things going on, during the process. But just to get back to it, I think it was Jennifer that said, just make sure you keep the board apprised. I think if nothing else, Peter, between you, Scott, and me, we'll just make sure that we've got the board apprised of what's going on. And then if we need to have another workshop, in a month or two, and just make sure everyone understands where we are, so that, when we get to June and you have to make a final decision, you've got all the information that you need. And tonight was just to chew on all the stuff I gave you. It's just throwing it out. And, I think a lot of it does come down to, money and how much can we afford to do. And as we get price tags on these things, I think it'll be easier to kind of say, well, that makes sense. Let's look at that again, or that one's out. That's not going to happen. Just share cost of things too, and putting it all together.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I know it's been a long few hours. So if no one else has anything else in regards to our workshop, I will seek a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Peter. Second. Thank you, Kate. And I will roll call one last time. Peter Bingham.
Yes.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
Ann Maximovich.
Yes.
Ty McGinley. Yes. Kate Perrin.
Yes.
Mike Simmons.
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart.
Yes.
Mike Williams.
Yes.
Elias Leggett-Barr.
Yes.
And Madison Dalton. We may have lost her.
I think we left. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Elias and Madison, that you have a red day tomorrow. I don't know who that superintendent did that, but maybe next time will be a real snow day. We'll see.
We say in the Army. What we say in the Army about that is a personal problem.
It was tough, Jeff, to send it out during the meeting, but
what's
good
that?
night. It's tough to send it out during the meeting, but
I know, but I had to get it out. I wanted to get it out tonight because Yarmouth and Falmouth already beat me.
no, they didn't beat you. They hadn't called it yet. So
Oh, they hadn't. Oh, they texted me and told me they were. Okay.
nope, not yet. So you did it first. So
Okay.
Thank you.
All
Have
right.
a good night.